Hey guys, are you ready to transform your mind so you can transform your life? Coach Myrna brings you one-on-one coaching and expert guests weekly to help you to grow. Because happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy goal.
Looking for personal growth? Let's do it. Isn't that the sweetest sound? That's the sound of another sale or another dollar hitting your Shopify e-commerce store. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Sign up for $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/transform, all lowercase. So my two circle back is you found out as a parent trying to homeschool your daughter. Um, didn't the school ever bring that to your attention?
So first of all, I just want to just go back to what you said. So actually now we're starting using the term ADHD, like it or loathe it. It is just what it is. And ADD is not used as much anymore because what we know is that the hyperactivity isn't just external, which is why so many girls were missed. So we have the internal hyperactivity, which manifests as anxiety, worry, overthinking, nervousness, rumination, and insomnia, skin picking, like restlessness, but we're sort of like holding it in, which is why so many girls go undetected because women and girls have sort of been conditioned to mask and present themselves in a sort of more feminine, I'm saying that in quoted, quotes. And we know what behavior is acceptable. On the whole, I'm not generalizing too much, but girls kind of know what behavior is acceptable in sort of social situations. And
Welcome back to Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. I'm your host, life coach Myrna Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Kate Moryoussef. And Kate and I are going to be talking on the topic, how undiagnosed ADHD is robbing women of 11 years of life. So this is an important topic because we all think that ADHD is just for hyperactive kids, but apparently it does affect our midlife and elderly or adult population. So knowledge is always power. So stay to the end and you might even see if you might have any symptoms of ADHD as an adult. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're very welcome. All right. Let me give you guys a brief introduction. Kate Moryoussef is a leading voice in the ADHD space in the UK. She's an author, a certified EFT and neurolinguistic programming practitioner, and the host of the award-winning ADHD Women's Wellbeing podcast, which has over 2.5 million downloads. Diagnosed at 40, Kate finally let go of guilt, self-blame, and embarrassment and transformed her relationships. Her personal breakthrough led her to leave a successful PR career and dedicate her life to ADHD awareness. Now a sought-after advocate and speaker, Kate has been featured in Attitude magazine and on top 1% podcasts like this one. She is spreading the message and, for us to understand adult ADHD. Awesome. All right. So, Kate, as we dive in, let's get a little bit of your backstory. Your ADHD diagnosis at 40 was a major turning point in your life. Can you share what led you to that moment and how it changed your life? Maybe you can add in there what was happening to you that you decided to get tested for ADHD.
Yeah. So it was definitely a turning point in my life. So I'm 45 now and I was diagnosed at 40. And that was the very middle of the pandemic. I was homeschooling my 4 kids. And even though I grew up with 2 brothers who had been diagnosed with ADHD when they were kids. So we're talking very early on in understanding ADHD in the very early 90s, maybe late 80s. I didn't have a clue. I just kind of thought, I don't have ADHD because I'm nothing like my brothers. And then I was parenting and homeschooling and doing all the things and running a business and retraining, like being the busiest I've ever been. And obviously the pandemic hit. And I found myself having to sit with my 9-year-old daughter who had struggled at school from the beginning. And we'd had her tested for dyslexia and dyspraxia and lots of other sort of learning challenges, but nothing ever came out conclusive. And I don't know, we scratched our heads, but, cracked on, and we just were guided by the teachers. And it was only until I sat down with my daughter and I realized, wow, she's really, really struggling here. And that was, she really struggled to sit on the chair. She struggled to get started. She struggled with the processing of the information. She struggled with the overwhelm. She honestly, like the reading, the putting her thoughts out onto paper, but also there was a big issue with emotional regulation and her self-worth about how it presented in the way she studied and learned. And I was like, this is, there's something else going on here. So I started putting all her traits and symptoms in, and it came up straight away, ADHD in girls. So then I was like, started reading and researching, and so many other traits were coming up that I really related to as a child, teenager, woman, in their 20s, 30s, and now 40. And I was thinking, oh my God, I've lived with this as well. And so immediately, as I'm very resourceful when I get an idea in my head, and I just went, right, I'm going to go and find you someone to assess you for ADHD. And she was assessed, diagnosed, and 2 weeks later, I went through the same process. So within 2 weeks, in the depths of the pandemic, we were both diagnosed together, and I just went on this mission. It was really a mission. I was like, I need to help my daughter to make sure she fulfills her potential. She's the most amazing person, amazing personality, great imagination, full of love and life and energy, but she needed help. And I never wanted her to feel less than or she wasn't good enough. So I went down this whole rabbit hole, and I realized there was so much that I'd struggled with, so many other things as well. And we'll get into that in the conversation as we get older, how it presents itself. And throughout my family, I started seeing a family tree of ADHD. It was kind of just this epiphany. It was just really life-changing, but it didn't happen overnight. This was sort of gradual. And I want to caveat all of this with saying that it was very overwhelming to understand all of this through a whole new lens. And so I really did. It was slow. And then it kind of got to a point about 6 months later where I needed to learn more and do more. And I already had a podcast. And I decided that I was going to change the podcast, and I was going to do a podcast about ADHD and women and women's well-being. And that was 3.5 years ago. Now, nearly 3 million downloads later. There's a book now I've just written. It's come out, and if this comes out, it's the 12th of August. It comes out in the States, the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Toolkit. And that is because I was desperate for the information. I was desperate, and it wasn't there. And I thought, I'm going to find this out and share the knowledge, and which is what I've been doing for the past, 4 years.
That's amazing. I love when people take their personal struggles and help others, because I do believe that's what God gives them to you for,
Yeah.
You can't have a testimony without a test. So that's amazing. So some circle backs. Now, I've had children because I was a foster mom, and I've had children that was diagnosed with ADHD, because you're right. They're struggling in school. It shows up as a learning disability or a learning issue, because you're right. You're not able to focus. You can't sit in the chair. I mean, a lot of kids, because they are not processing, you use the word processing as well, they will try to do something else to distract themselves, or you know what I mean? So I understand that. And just so for I mean, I'm not sure if anybody that's listening would not know what the definition is of the ADHD, right? The H in there is part of the hyperactive, because you can have ADD, which is attention deficit, and the ADHD is the hyperactive, which is the one you can't sit still. And a lot of times when you see kids running around and can't sit still, you got ants in their pants, the first thing you say is that they've got ADHD, hyperactive. So my two circle back is, you found out as a parent trying to homeschool your daughter. Um, didn't the school ever bring that to your attention?
So first of all, I just want to just go back to what you said. So actually now we're starting using the term ADHD, like it or loathe it. It is just what it is. And ADD is not used as much anymore because what we know is that the hyperactivity isn't just external, which is why so many girls were missed. So we have the internal hyperactivity, which manifests as anxiety, worry, overthinking, nervousness, rumination, and insomnia, skin picking, like restlessness, but we sort of like holding it in, which is why so many girls go undetected because women and girls have sort of been conditioned to mask and present themselves in a sort of more feminine, I'm saying that in quoted, quotes. And we know what behavior is acceptable. On the whole, I'm not generalizing too much, but girls kind of know what behavior is acceptable in sort of social situations, and we contain it. Whereas boys, there's less expectation for them to behave and sit still. Boys can be rambunctious. Boys can be active, and they can run around. They can play sports, and they can channel it. And if their behavior in school is a little bit on the edge, it's sort of accepted a little bit, and there's a firm hand or whatever. But with girls, if a girl plays it like a boy, it's this, it's not accepted. So I just wanted to differentiate between that. With my
Good. Thank you
daughter,
for bringing that up. Right.
yeah, so I've got 4 kids, and since then, all 4 of them have been diagnosed in different ways. So the neurodivergence has showed up in very different ways. And for her, she's as good as gold, she's now 14, like this one, and she's never been, the worst thing she's ever done in class is be chatty. It's probably be a bit like she tap. I've got a pen here. She might tap her pen and distract someone. She might write all over her hands because that's her way of kind of fidgeting and being restless and probably trying to concentrate, but she has to do something to sort of fidget so the information goes in. She can't just sit there. Um, so she's never been badly behaved or anything like that. She's actually very, very sensitive. And
Nice.
again, that's the thing with girls, and very highly, highly sensitive. So the only thing that came back from school was, yes, maybe it's dyslexia. She is struggling with her reading and her writing and her handwriting. And she does need to sit in a quieter environment so she can, when she does a comprehension or something like that, she can really concentrate. But there was never really like, yes, your daughter flagging it for ADHD, like never for that.
Right.
So unfortunately, if you think about it, ADHD in girls has only just become topical. The awareness is built, and that's only the past 4 or 5 years. So if you think about the amount of women and girls who've slipped through the net, there's a reason why we've been called the lost generation. And that's because so many women. And don't forget that one of the main traits is things like anxiety, depression, OCD, disordered eating, addictive behaviors, impulsivity. It really, really, really does span a large trait. I would say sort of it's like a Venn diagram, and to then be able to understand, to be able to connect the dots and then see how it presents. So very typically, a lot of the women may have been in and out of the doctor's surgery for antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. They may have struggled with certain things in academia. There may have been difficulties in relationships. There may have been dysfunction in the family. There may have been addictive tendencies throughout different, parents. And it's only when we're able to see this bigger picture, we're able to say, okay, there's been ADHD, maybe autism, both. We know that ADHD and autism coexist very commonly now. Again, something very new that a lot of people don't know about. So we're understanding a new landscape here, especially through the female eyes. And it's so important. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking about this, because women need to know, my age, your age, later on in, 20, I get women and girls in their late teens and 20s. I get women in their 70s saying to me, oh my God, I'm only just hearing and learning about this now. So it's really crucial information.
Wow. Well, that's interesting because I would never have thought of that because, yeah, I mean, attention deficit hyperactivity, you can't concentrate and you can't sit still. Those are the only two things that I know people evaluate on. So that's amazing. So now let's get to the adults. You said that as you were, looking at your daughter's symptoms, you recognize that you've had some of the same. So let's say it's someone who's never even thought that they would have ADHD. What are some of the things that go unnoticed, especially in midlife?
Okay, so one of the things I've not mentioned yet is hormones. And what we know specifically for women and girls is that it's very hormone related and it's interconnected. So what we do know now through very the sort of like late studies and research that's only just coming out, there's been no studies on this in especially around women's health and ADHD, is that we are hormone sensitive, our nervous systems are hormones, are sensitive. And so we are going to have more challenging puberty. We're more prone to postnatal depression, postpartum depression. We are more prone to early and more challenging perimenopause. And we are more prone, there's something like the statistic is something around 48% more likely to have PMDD, which is a much more severe version of PMT, PMS. And so every single month, women are suffering hormonally. They're suffering in the major chapters of their life hormonally. We know that neurodivergent women are more likely to have endometriosis, migraines, gut problems, histamine issues. Honestly, the list goes on. This picture is only just being painted before our eyes, and thankfully we're getting validation from top doctors, top psychiatrists, endocrinologists. We are basically, science is catching up with women's lived experiences. So the women's lived experiences have been going on for decades, for generations. So many of us can see our mothers, grandmothers, aunts, sisters, all suffering in different ways. When we talk about nervous breakdowns, mental breakdowns, women who suddenly just stop coping in midlife, during the menopause or perimenopause, and again, unfortunately, there's a much higher suicide rate in ADHD women as well because of the hormonal factors of not being able to cope with life because our hormones have been stripped back, and our ADHD that we've just been managing, by like the skin of our teeth. We've been getting through it through all sorts of different kind of workarounds and scaffolding. The hormones strip that back and everything's laid bare. And then again, we know in midlife that difficult things happen: divorce, elderly parents, kids leaving home, career change, financial problems. Again, perimenopause, menopause. It's kind of like this awakening, and we're being stripped back, and women are made.
It's hard to cope. Yeah, I get you. Yeah, it's hard to cope. Yep, coping strategies.
Yeah.
I've been an entrepreneur since the early 90s, even winning the Entrepreneur of the Year award. But when I first thought of starting my business, I had the passion and the vision, but zero clue where to start when it came to selling online. This is where Shopify can help. Shopify helps you set up your digital storefront. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. From household names like Mattel and Drew House to brands just getting started. Whether you're selling physical products, digital downloads, or services, Shopify has everything you need to launch, manage, and scale your business. Shopify is also packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify helps you transform your business with expertise in everything from managing inventory to processing returns. So, if you're ready to sell, you're ready to Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for $1 per month trial period and start selling today at shopify.com/transform. Go to shopify.com/transform.
I had a question in my mind. So, because like I said, I've had kids that's had ADHD. And you talked about impulse control as part of one of the symptoms. I know it's a prefrontal cortex problem. I'm not understanding the hormonal connection. Can you bridge that?
Yeah. Okay. So what we do know is that ADHD is a neurobiological condition. So that means that it's going on in our brain, and like you're right, there's different ways of seeing ADHD. We can see now through brain scans. And I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Daniel Amen. So he's an amazing neurologist, neuroscientist, or a combination of lots of different sorts of. Is a brain expert, and he's done thousands of brain scans, probably the most anywhere in the world. That he understands ADHD in brains, and what we know is that we can see it show up in different parts of our brain, the limbic system, the amygdala. We can see how it can manifest differently. So my ADHD might look different to my daughter's. And like I said, I've got 4 kids. Their ADHD all looks slightly different. One's more impulsive, one's more distracted, one's more anxious. And so it can show up, which is why we only understand this. That's why I say neurodivergence a little bit more, because we can kind of understand that we're working with different types of brains, which is a good thing because we can change our environment. We can put things in place to help ourselves. So with regards to hormones, so this is very basic, but dopamine and estrogen they interact with each other. And so for a woman, when our estrogen and our progesterone goes down in the luteal phase of our cycle, just before our period, postnatally, perimenopause, when there's really quite severe fluctuations going on, that can impact our dopamine receptors, which means that our dopamine fluctuations are going up, which means that we will be more likely to maybe want to binge eat, scroll, impulse control, severe emotional regulation, our working memory, brain fog, memory. Honestly, it's so connected. Again, it impacts our serotonin, it impacts our oxytocin. It's just so many different ways. But essentially, if we think about as a woman, our progesterone and our estrogen is fluctuating throughout our cycle. And that is when some women feel brilliant on, first week of their cycle, they're flying. And then after their first week, they start feeling a bit more kind of shaky. And then, if you do suffer with PMDD, you will have a very difficult 10 days, 2 weeks, 1 week of your cycle where ADHD takes over. You feel incredibly sensitive, emotional, depressed, and that is exhausting to live with. So that's why medication can help, hormone treatment can help, different variations of medication can help. But most importantly for me is lifestyle, holistic well-being support to manage all of this alongside any medication that you want to take.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad I asked the question because, right. And you answered it brilliantly. That it's not only in the prefrontal cortex, it's in all parts of the brain. So that was amazing. All right. Well, our topic today is how undiagnosed ADHD is robbing women of 11 years of life. So that's a very specific number. So let's talk about that now. Why do you say that?
Okay, so that's a statistic. I mean, I don't want to kind of it's a little bit sort of clickbaity, but essentially it's telling you what's happening. It's kind of giving you like the quick snapshot of the situation, which means that it impacts women from all parts of life. So whether it's diet, nutrition, I mentioned addiction, I mentioned depression, I mentioned relationship problems, so many things, sleep. A lot of women struggle to look after themselves from maybe an executive functioning challenge, difficulties with cooking, with remembering to drink water, remembering to take medication. There's lots of other things, combined with this, if you're living undiagnosed ADHD, there's a lot of difficult, challenging traits that you're dealing with every single day. And it feels like a lot of women say it's like an uphill battle every day, getting up, eating, showering, getting out the house, going to work, doing all the things that we have to do as women, especially. And that's why I say about women, we're holding anyway, neurotypical, neurodivergent, we're holding so much. As much as we think the world is progressing, we are still typically the mums at home, doing the shopping, doing the cooking, doing all the childcare, and we're expected to work, and we want to work. We've got ambitions. We want to, leave our mark in this world. And it comes at a cost. And so many neurodivergent women are burnout. Again, so many of my community, myself included, all relate to cycles of burnout, feeling so exhausted and depleted that they have to take time off work, they get sick. We also know that inflammation plays a very big role in undiagnosed ADHD and diagnosed ADHD, that ADHD women are more likely to have heart issues. We're more likely to have, things like I said, mentioned gut issues and autoimmune conditions. So what I'm trying to say is that it is a full brain body experience, and things like hypermobility as well. So chronic pain, chronic fatigue. So what I'm trying to paint here is for anyone that's listening and they either listening for themselves or they know someone that has dealt with all these different health conditions, but no one's really had an answer. And that's come up here and that's come up there, and the doctors dismiss them, and they've been, invalidated, or they've been put on the wrong medication and never quite felt right, but no one's really had any answers. I want you to know that it's all connected and you're not imagining things. And I think as women, we're so used to being gaslit, or we're used to being dismissed, or unfortunately, we're used to suffering. Like women are just used to suffering.
Yeah.
We've been told, just get on with it. Just deal with it. You're a woman. You've got too much, you've got to hold the family together.
Right.
And it, for a lot of people, that's very, very difficult. So when that statistic is sort of there, it is to show that it can really impact our health, like our physical health. And unfortunately, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it in, family members as well.
Right. Okay. All right. So this ADHD conversation is all inclusive. But when somebody sees that diagnosis and those four letters, first thing they're thinking of is attention deficit. So does that show up every time, or it's not there? I mean, I know you're talking about the H part of it is anxiety and holding, you know, internally being very anxious and or chaotic internally, but not running around and can't sit still kind of thing. But if we were to pick one or two symptoms that is across the board, even though you might have extra little things that you're going to add on, is attention deficit in there at all? Every time?
So what's interesting is that weirdly, so many of us with ADHD, I haven't got a deficit of attention. I have too much attention, but only on the stuff that I love, the stuff that lights us up, the stuff that we really enjoy. The deficit, and I hate that word deficit, is typically in the subjects, the topics, the things that just don't light up our dopamine receptors, that aren't motivating us, that aren't giving us that enthusiasm, that excitement. So you'll see there's a really interesting statistic that something like entrepreneurs there's like a 60 or 70% chance they're going to be neurodivergent. And that is because they are working to the beat of their own drum. They are super passionate about what they're doing. They're working for themselves. They've curated, they've got freedom, they've got flexibility. They have chosen their avenue of interest, and they work hard. We see workaholism huge in our community, which contributes to the burnout, because we're so passionate, we're so excited about what we do, and we're so ambitious. So actually the deficit only comes when you have a kid who loves history or loves geography, loves sport, whatever that is, and then they're made to sit in a class that they have no interest. They literally clock watching, and every second feels like torture. Then the deficit is there. But if you put a kid or a person who is loving, like you're a musician, an artist, what I do, I love my job. I could work 24 hours a day if I didn't need to sleep. So that is where then I say to people, if you want ADHD to work for you, you find what you love and you do it and you channel that passion, but always, always watch out for the overworking, the burnout, because we all need to rest and recharge and decompress. And I do a huge amount of work around this where we have to look after our well-being. That's why we have this scale that we kind of are quite extreme in everything that we do. So yeah, the deficit is only there if we're incredibly bored. Again, if you're in a meeting and you think oh my God, I don't want to be in this meeting. This meeting is so pointless. It's people are talking for the sake of talking. I've got stuff to do. Then you'll start feeling the restless, the tapping, the impatience. And yeah, so
Okay. All right.
there's a lot of successful people with ADHD. Just you need to look out for them.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you also mentioned the fact that that sometimes ADHD, goes parallel with autism, and autism is one of those things where a kid can be struggling in one area, but brilliant in another area, because that's basically how they are. I have one of my foster kids was diagnosed with Asperger's, and which is on the I think that they call it now autism.
Yes.
They changed it. It's now autism. And yeah, he was very creative, and that's what his Asperger thing challenged him to. A good art student. And then I heard that IBM was hiring those type of people because of their ability to concentrate on one task. So yeah, you might think, okay, they're not processing things correctly because of disruption there. But if they do want to process something that they like or they're good at, they can do it. So I'm glad that we're making that distinction. That's the same ADHD. What was that?
Sport's a really big one. So again, I had an amazing woman who's written a book about ADHD in sport, and she hypothesizes from working with so many different people, professional athletes, that it's something like 70% of professional athletes have got ADHD because they are so hyper focused on their sport and they love it so much that they will just throw everything into that.
Yes.
And they have a huge amount of energy for it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is the hyperactive part. Oh, amazing. Awesome. 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 All right. Well, I love our conversation. It's opening up, my mind on ADHD, and hopefully it's opening up our listeners' mind on it too. So, are there specific tools, resources, or practices that have made the biggest impact on your journey and that you can recommend to others?
So yeah, I mean, I always say that I coach and help the version of myself, a few years behind. So I'm always learning. I've got ADHD myself. I've got 4 kids with it. I'm constantly challenged. Like I'll go to bed and I'll be like, oh, can't believe that was another day. And sometimes I forget the tools and the practices because I'm living in it. And that's why I wrote the book, the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Toolkit, because I wanted to have it all there for people who need to open it up in a chapter or just, open it up and just have a breather and just learn something practical, just help them, whether it's anxiety, it's breath work. I use something called EFT tapping, which is
in your bio, right?
yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful self-regulating, calming practice, but it's also so helpful for healing, for uncovering things, for releasing old beliefs and pain, and it's very, very helpful. But I truly believe that when we understand ourselves, when we understand where the ADHD trips us up, where we have those blocks, where you have those difficulties, we have to lean into holistic tools, but also medication if that works. But things like nutrition is very important. Eating lots of good protein, drinking lots of water, moving our body every day, making sure that we are getting outside, we are away from technology, we're connecting with like-minded people, we are channeling our creativity. We, really making sure that we are nurturing our well-being, because it's very easy for us to go into this sort of tunnel vision working, intense pressure that we put on ourselves, and also recognizing where we're so sensitive. Something I've not mentioned about ADHD, and I have a chapter in the book about it, is something called rejection sensitive dysphoria. And it's highly, highly prevalent in the ADHD community. And it's a very severe, intense feeling of feeling like we're being rejected, judged, criticized, left out, that we are never quite fitting in, that we're always doing something wrong. And it's a very debilitating part of ADHD, and a lot of people suffer with it and they don't know what it is. So they grow up all their lives, and people have said to them, "You're so sensitive, just get over it. Stop thinking about it. Just move on, move past it." Or, "Why are you always so nervous about X, Y, and Z?" Or worried about friendship groups, or you have issues with friendships and relationships. And actually, to understand RSD, to understand rejection sensitive dysphoria, is so profound for people because they have an awareness and they can understand it. And they can have they can breathe, and they can create a bit of distance, and they see it, and they find ways to move through it. And whether it's real, it is a real situation, it has happened, and they can learn to move through it, or it's perceived like they're sort of, so sensitive that they pick up on anything, and they can say, "Oh, actually, the reason why I wasn't invited to that was because they had invited other friends that I'm not friendly with, or that I didn't need to go to that party because I didn't even like that person," or whatever it is. And we're able to have perspective, and we're able to reframe things. So I just wanted to bring that into the conversation, because when people hear about RSD, it can often be such a big pivotal moment in their healing journey as well. So yeah, there's, like I say in my book, the podcast has got so many episodes talking about so many parts of ADHD that you could probably listen to it for 2 years and still keep learning.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a big, because you included so much more things other than I'm still going to go back to that because that's the definition: attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I mean, you have broadened our scope now. But the sensitive part is something that's very interesting, because there's a lot of people that you say, "Wow, you're so sensitive." And I am like one of these people is, I'm not going to get offended because, but some people are very sensitive to everything you say, your tone. They think that, you're not including them. And that's one of the good symptoms to go and look for this ADHD, umbrella, because, so that's a good one. And then, of course, you talked about, the internalizing, thinking how you should show up, and internalizing your chaotic, feelings, instead of, jumping around, you're like holding it in, kind of thing. So yeah, so that's pretty good. Um, so I know your book has got, all the tools and resources and practices, and of course you talked about your podcast. Yeah, if somebody's been diagnosed with ADHD, it's very good to look at the podcast, because each podcast is going to have a specific topic. Today we're talking about an umbrella, and we're just barely touching on small little things. And if you want to get deeper and understand all these different parts of it, then you're right. You pick up a copy of Kate's book, or listen to her podcast. But so what exactly is in your book, The ADHD Women's Wellbeing Toolkit? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I would say the book is a combination of my lived experience, but also what I do to help myself, my clients, my community, all the things that I know from doing so much work in this community, like what women, especially, but I've had a lot of men say to me, "I need this book as well. Like, this book's amazing." And I'm getting a lot of men saying to me, "I'm reading this book for my wife, for my partner, for my daughter, because I need to understand this better from a more integrative and holistic perspective about how ADHD shows up in so many different ways for women and girls." And then I've got some great experts. So because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I have had so many incredible guests. I was like, "Right, you're coming in, you're coming in." Dr. Ned Halliwell, who's the most amazing ADHD psychiatrist over where you are in the States. He has been working in ADHD for like 40 odd years. He really knows this. It's his speciality. He's given us some great advice and really tapping into this expert guidance. And we've also got an amazing kind of feature where women in my community have shared their lived experiences to really validate. And so when women are reading this book for the first time, they're either waiting to be diagnosed, they've been diagnosed, they're reading it for another person. They're understanding it through so many different lenses, and they're getting the different tools, the different resources. They're getting little micro practices that they can do in 30 seconds or 90 seconds, but also quite deep. I'm quite a spiritual person, so quite deep spiritual kind of guidance and my insights as to how we can live well holistically with this different type of brain and nervous system. And I talk about the nervous system a lot because very often we are very highly sensitive, highly anxious, agitated, restless, and we need to learn that it's safe. Sometimes it's not been safe for a lot of women to rest and relax, and they really have to change and learn. And so towards the end of the book, I've got chapters on, leaning into our creativity, fulfillment, joy, and acceptance. It's a lot about self-acceptance and authenticity. So I feel like it's a bit of a blend of a self-help book, bit of spiritual guidance, real kind of doctor's advice, and giving women like I say, like a toolkit so they can live life and thrive. And the strap line is embrace your authentic self and harness your true potential, because what I know from so many women is that they haven't embraced their authentic self. They've masked, they've suppressed, they've pushed things down, they've tried different things, they've had addictions, they've had difficult relationships, they have deep self, I hate to use it, loathing. They haven't accepted themselves and they've not harnessed their true potential. So many women that say, I've always wanted to work in gardening, childcare, cookery, but I was told I had to go down this route or that route or all sorts. And they have lived a life that doesn't feel aligned to them. Or I want to go and live in nature. I want to go and open a cafe by the sea, like whatever that might be. And so I just hope it's a little invitation. It's like a permission slip to start living life according to how your body, your nervous system, everything wants to work. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's good. Yeah, the tools, because you're struggling with certain things, and you're giving them the tools, by a psychiatrist, by your lived experience, by other people's lived experiences. It's always great to help people with stories, and you're talking about yourself. But one of the things that we missed, or I just remembered that I missed it, is relationships. So before we wrap up, how does ADHD affect our relationships?
Yeah. So I have actually quite a lot of good conversations on the podcast about this because it really is interwoven. Unfortunately, I come from a divorced family. There's a lot of divorce in my family. There's a lot of neurodivergence in my family as well. And because ADHD impacts our communication skills, it impacts the way we are as people in relationships, undiagnosed, we can be very difficult, challenging people to live with because we don't understand ourselves and our behaviors. So we don't know how to stop or change or evolve. And again, I've mentioned things like addiction that unfortunately and that can range from alcohol, drugs, smoking, workaholism, gambling, sex. It can really, shopping. And it can also, there's a lot of implications around finances, like struggle with finances, whether that's impulsivity or just sometimes it's just finances just don't work with our brain. And all of these different things, whether it's all those different factors coming together, and that can put a huge amount of pressure. But also very often we are undiagnosed parenting kids with ADHD as well. That puts a lot of pressure on relationships. So you've got all of this coming, but when we have awareness and we have understanding, we can have therapy, we can have coaching, we can have compassion, we can have new understanding, we can have patience. And it's not just the partner without the ADHD that needs to have all of this. The person with ADHD needs to take self-responsibility. Okay, they get the diagnosis. This is not a get out of jail card. This is okay. I need to sort myself out, and I struggle to tidy up. I struggle to put gas in the car. I struggle to get up and take my kids to school. I need to sort this out. I need to be a responsible adult. And yes, it's hard for me, but I need to learn. And that is why coaching with ADHD is so, so important. So it's a really, it can be an invitation for a lot of relationship healing, but it unfortunately is also a contribution to a lot of dysfunction and chaos and breakdown in relationships. And again, there's a statistic of really high levels of divorce with ADHD if it's undiagnosed.
Yes. All right. Well, I'm glad I remembered that. I remembered it just as you were talking about the tools, and then you mentioned it as one of the things in your book. So amazing. I'm glad that I didn't leave that out, because yes, I mean, if you've got an ADHD kid, then your relationship with that child is, tenable, because you're always saying, you're not doing this, you're this and that, parents. And then if you've got an ADHD partner, then you have the same problems, right? So it's good. I'm glad you said it's not a get out of jail card.
Yeah, because I think just what I want to say about that is that emotional regulation or emotional dysregulation, going from 0 to 100, and anger and irritation and impatience and intolerance, like all of that manifests in a type of emotional dysregulation. And sometimes it can be so hard. You see this reactivity, outbursts, anger, so everything just explodes and the whole house is just in chaos. And when we understand what's going on, we can have we're going to go and have a breather. You go outside, you go for a walk. I'm going to go in the bathroom. We're not going to allow this to happen. Decompression time, finding ways to help our family members. And so that is why I always say awareness and education is so key, because these families don't need to break up. They just need help and support.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. I also say one of the things that I say in my coaching is you have to know yourself to grow yourself. But here you're saying you have to know yourself in order to, be a better person in a relationship, be a better person to yourself. Self-awareness, when is the first thing you talked about? Self-acceptance. Hey, I'm not perfect, but I've got a reason. And now I can help myself by, with these tools. So last time I'm going to ask you, I know that there's medication for this. Do you sanction that? Do you believe that it's something that people should do?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I don't think it's perfect. It's not perfect. But it can be really, really helpful in certain times, situations. And I don't think it should be stigmatized. I think if it can help you, your child, get through, whether it's school, high school, college, I think it's so important, because so many ADHD people don't make it through school because they just can't. They don't have that attention span, or they can't sit down, or they're not interested. And unfortunately, the academic system is not made up for many kids with ADHD. I wish I could see more outdoor classrooms and physical kind of learning and all things like that, but it's just not happening. Unless you can't sit and listen to a boring, class, then, there's something wrong with you, not anything wrong with the system. Anyway, so unfortunately, medication is a means to an end for some people. For some people, medication is, I can't get up without the medication because I need to then have a shower and all of that. So it's really, yes, it can be very helpful.
All right. Just want to ask that because I've had several psychiatrists on the show that didn't believe in medication. So I just want to put that out there. So that's great. And that's
It's personal. It's very it's personal.
Yeah.
It's not a only medication. So I would either say yes, medication, but also look at the lifestyle and the holistic.
Right. Exactly. Right. And, once you start doing the lifestyle things, then maybe you'll be able to get off of medication.
Exactly.
Amazing. All right. Awesome. So tell us, tell our listeners where they can connect with you, where they can pick up a copy of your book. We know it's at Amazon. Let us know your website. Tell us again your podcast and also your social media handles.
Thank you. Yeah, so the book is the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Toolkit. Like you say, it's on Amazon. It's in all bookstores. It's out in the US on the 12th of August. It's already out in the UK. The podcast, ADHD Women's Wellbeing Podcast. It's all very simple, and my website is adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk. And if you head to my website, there's lots of resources, free and paid for. I've got workshops. And I've got lots of things happening, so you can head there. And I've created a lot of these resources in the podcast to help people. The podcast is all free, and then you can just tap in. And the book, again, I think it's just one of those things. It's small, it can go in your handbag, it can go on holiday, you can just have it on your bedside table. I've really wanted to make it easy to read, easy to process, so you can take what you need where you are in that day, that week, that month. So thank you so much for allowing me to include all of that.
You're very welcome. All right. What is your socials?
So people can find me talking about ADHD on ADHD Women's Wellbeing _pod. So ADHD Women's Wellbeing _pod. But if you just put that into Instagram, you'll find me.
Okay. All right. Yeah. What I like to do in the show notes is, link out to your book, your podcast. This is, I'll link out to your podcast and link out to your Instagram, which is the one that I use predominantly. Link out to your Instagram, and of course, when the episode is live, I'll also tag you on it. So that's why I asked for that. So, wow, Kate, you have blown my mind on ADHD. And I know that I was going to learn some new information because we're talking about adult ADHD. And I knew that the reason that we're talking about it is because it's different from the children ADHD, which we all think, those hyperactive kids that run around and they can't sit still. So I'm glad that our conversation really, burst through those, bad narratives and opened up our minds to. You mentioned something a minute ago as we were closing up there that started my mind about some family members that have a problem with shopping and and have a problem with addiction and all these different things. I have to go back and listen to that one very carefully because you said it very quickly. But yeah, it's
also there's so much to give. It's
exactly. In the relationships, those are some of the things you've got to look for. Okay, maybe this person has ADHD, right? So those are some of the things that but that's why we have a transcript. So I'll go back and listen to that very carefully. But yeah, relationships is probably one of the most important aspects of finding out and being able to cope with and have. I'm glad you called your book, the toolkit, so that you go in there and you get your tools.
Yeah.
What should I do in this situation? How do I calm myself? Which is a very good one, when I'm feeling overwhelmed or burnt out or chaotic, how do I calm down my nervous system? Things like that. So that is great. So thank you, Kate. I know it's like 8:00 there now, and
Yeah, I'm gonna go and have my dinner with my kids. But thank you so much. If you just collaborate, tag me, whatever, I will share. And when do you think it'll come out?
in about 2 months or so.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect.
And I will also send you an email when it's out that it's live. Okay, so you can look for the collaboration post. All right, well, listen, guys, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Transform Your Mind so you can transform your life. Today, we're talking about transforming your life by understanding if you have ADHD, if any of the conversation that we had today, something lit up for you, then maybe you might want to go and get that checked out, because when it's undiagnosed, that means that you can't have any tools to work with it. So I thank you for tuning in. Hope you got as much out of the conversation from Kate that I got. And Kate, thank you for being on the show, sharing your passion. I can tell you're very passionate about it. And thank you for the work that you do. So thank you guys, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Kate, for being on the show. And as we wrap up, I want to say namaste.
Thank you.
Okay.